Okay, let's get this show moving. Good morning, and thank you all for joining us this morning. My name is Margaret Hengen. I actually wear many hats, but today I'm with the Arizona Preservation Foundation. And welcome to our occasional webinar. For those who've never done our webinars before, just to give you a little background, Arizona Preservation Foundation started these free webinars during COVID, and has continued them since COVID, and bringing in speakers on a variety of different topics. Um, so today's topic is one of many. This is being recorded, and for those who are not familiar with it, Arizona Preservation Foundation does have a YouTube channel, and all of our past webinars are recorded and they are placed there for anyone to review and look at. So it's a great resource. So please take the time to take a look at the Arizona Preservation Foundation YouTube. Normally, I do these with my cohort, Dinah Reinardt, who is out of the country. So I'm actually on my own today. Um, and I would like to do a couple of housekeeping things. Key is we'd like folks to keep their mics on and their cameras off during the presentation. If you have comments, please put your comments in the chat, and I will be monitoring the comments. And at the end of the presentation, I'll be reading the comments to Susan to answer. Let's see. So with no further ado, let me introduce Susan Lawson, with the architect of the State Historic Preservation Office, and she was kind enough to provide a nice bio, so I will read her bio. According to her childhood diary, Susan Lawson decided at an age of 8 that she wanted to become an architect. Inspired by the historic campuses of the University of Virginia and Cornell University, where she received her education, she built her career around historic preservation and adaptive reuse. After 2 decades of professional practice in licensure in New York, she joined the Arizona State Historic Preservation Office in 2022 and considered it a privilege to serve the public by providing technical assistance in architecture and historic preservation. Outside of work, Susan fosters rescue pigs and enjoys trying to outclimb her husband and son at the local rock gym. Whether you're a preservation professional, architect, or contractor, planner, or owner of a historic property, this webinar, and she goes on, will offer a valuable guidance on balancing preservation principles with the practical realities of rehabilitation. So with no further ado, I'll let Susan Lawson take over and present her presentation. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, thank you guys. I'm not even sure what you can see. You can see me. Can you see my slide, both?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, super. All right. Well, as much as fostering rescued pigs sounds delightful, I foster rescued pugs. So if you're ever in the market for a pug, let me know. Thank you for inviting me today. I have been with SHPO for 4 years, and honestly, substitute materials weren't really at the forefront of my mind until the past couple of years when you all were making inquiries about it, which encouraged me to do my research, right? So what I'm thinking today is that I'm going to help provide you all with a framework for decision making. I know a lot of you are not architects, but you are in charge of making decisions about when it's appropriate to use substitute materials in your historic buildings. There's no one right answer. There's no guidebook. So I hope today's presentation achieves that. Preservation begins with a simple principle of repairing original materials whenever you can. But if you're here, you may have asked yourself, when a feature is beyond repair, when is it appropriate to use a substitute material? So in this webinar, we'll talk about how substitute materials can meet the Secretary of the Interior's standards for the treatment of historic buildings. What factors will guide material selection, and how these decisions can preserve character and integrity of our historic buildings. Please remember that SHPOs operate independently, so what works for us in Arizona may not be the recommended guidance in your state. It's important to understand the framework for the use of substitute materials, and I apologize for how text-heavy the next couple slides will be, but it'll get better soon. A lot more photos. The standards for the treatment of historic properties address 4 treatments: preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, and reconstruction. Often in the public, these words are used interchangeably, so it's good to know that SHPO and the National Park Service, to us, they really do have different meanings altogether. Only one set of standards will apply to a property that's undergoing a treatment, and today I'm going to focus on the rehabilitation standard, the one in orange there, and I'll read it. Rehabilitation is defined as the act or process of making possible a compatible use for a property through repair, alterations, additions, while preserving portions or features that convey its historical, cultural, or architectural values. So, fun fact, the standards date to 1977. You can find them and read them all on the National Park Service Technical Preservation website, or presumably still in hard copy. That's the 2017 book cover on the bottom right. These are 10 standards that are the recommended best practices for rehabilitation. In rehabilitation, historic building materials and character-defining features are protected and maintained like they are in the preservation treatment. However, greater latitude is given to replace extensively deteriorated, damaged, or missing features using either the same or a compatible substitute material. So as it relates to substitute materials, we're going to focus today on standard number 6, which is highlighted on this slide. Standard number 6 reads that deteriorated historic features will be repaired rather than replaced. Where the severity of deterioration requires replacement of a distinctive feature, and here's the important part, the new features will match the old in design, color, texture, and where possible, materials. So when I review projects, my first preference is the preservation of historic materials. If that's not possible, repair would be the next best option. Here's a PSA. What may look like complete failure to you may actually be repairable. So there are qualified professionals that can help you make those determinations. When a material is too deteriorated for repair, then we can consider replacement. Replacement in kind with the same material is our standard recommendation, but a closer look at standard 6 leaves open the possibility that in certain circumstances, a substitute material might be a good solution. The possibility of using substitute materials was being considered in the late 1980s when the National Park Service issued a preservation brief on the topic. It was recently revised in 2023 to reflect current practices, the broader range of substitute materials available, and how these materials can sometimes provide more flexibility and less costly alternatives while meeting the standards. Brief 16 provides the framework for evaluating the appropriateness of the use of substitute materials in the context of a rehabilitation project. It's what I use when I do project review under Section 106 or our State Act or even in the tax credit program. This quote here notes that with proper planning, careful specifications, and supervision, substitute materials can be used successfully in the process of restoring the visual appearance of historic resources. Brief 16 is available for download on the Park Service Technical Preservation Brief website. It's right there if you, I guess, can screen cap it. And it's there along with about like 40 or 50 other briefs on specific topics. It's so useful. They're intended to help anyone involved in historic preservation formulate plans for their continued use of their properties consistent with the rehabilitation standards. I won't lie, it's pretty dense reading, so get ready for that. Today's presentation is based on Brief 16, as well as my experience reviewing projects in Arizona. I understand some of my viewers today are probably subject matter experts, and some of them may just have learned about the existence of this brief a minute ago. So hopefully what I can offer today can be useful to both types of attendees and everyone else in the middle. Okay, pretty pictures. There's been a long history of substitute materials in our country, dating back to at least the 18th century. For example, President George Washington created a rusticated stone look when he expanded his inherited Mount Vernon home. The Mount Vernon website has a lot of interesting information on this if you want to learn more. Rather than using stone, he used beveled and notched wood, which you can see pretty clearly in that bottom left picture, with a sand painted coating. That's a screen cap from a full YouTube video about how to do it on the upper left, to make it appear like a more substantial masonry building, which I think you got it if you look at that right-hand photo. In writing a letter to his contractors, Washington noted that sanding was designed to answer 2 purposes: durability and representation of stone. So, characteristic of the man, the treatment was innovative, functional, and economical. The National Park Service provides these 20th century examples of substitute materials on historic buildings from across the country. Starting at the far left, we have an image of concrete block cast to mimic quarried stone. Next up is a cast iron storefront, commonly used as a substitute for wood storefronts. Scored stucco on a brick structure, as shown in that third image, was another way to cheaply imitate stone facades. And lastly, terracotta with varying glazing techniques can provide a lightweight alternative to stone. So now that we've taken a look at history, what are the common reasons for considering substitute materials today? And so these are some scenarios that I see here in Arizona. Top left, unavailability of materials. Asbestos roof shingles, asbestos siding, they are no longer being produced and are being removed as hazardous materials. Upper right, lack of partisans. Stone covers, decorative plasters come to mind. They may be hard to come by or have very long wait lists if you find them. Bottom left, reconstruction of lost features. Decorative features are often lost in prior renovations, and maybe you want to bring them back. And very important this past year to Arizona, wildfire risks. For example, wood shingle roofs are no longer good options for wildfire-prone areas. So we should talk about the elephant in the room, which is money. I really like this quote. It's from a Park Service presentation that they gave the SHPO tax credit reviewers. The standards are inherently flexible and are applied taking into consideration the economic and technical feasibility of each project. However, cost alone should not be the only factor in assessing the use of a substitute. The historic character of a building must still be retained. So another factor in project planning can be when an in-kind replacement material is found to be prohibitively expensive. In that case, it's reasonable to consider a substitute that would offer a good visual and physical match. The example above is a 1904 Reardon Mansion in Flagstaff. It's owned by Arizona State Parks. You'll be seeing this example come up throughout my presentation. It was built by lumber baron brothers Timothy and Michael Reardon, who owned the Arizona Lumber and Timber Company. They used local ponderosa pine, log slab siding, and volcanic stone to construct their 13,000 square foot duplex home, which reflects the region's rich timber history. The Reardon brothers' Flagstaff sawmill is directly tied to the economic, social, and political growth of the city. Their family home is emblematic of the family's influence as lumber magnates. So under the State Historic Preservation Act, the owner, the Arizona State Parks, they consult with our office on rehabilitation projects like these. And during their project planning, they discovered that the cost of an in-kind wood shingle roof replacement was becoming prohibitively expensive, given the frequent life cycle replacements that were required. Wood roofs are no longer performing well in this climate. Sometimes they're not even allowed. So consultation opened up a discussion about the appropriate use for a substitute material for roofing that could provide a similar look. You can see a before image on the left and after on the right. We haven't received any reports. The general public believes this to be anything but a wood shingle roof, which is probably a good measure of success, but we'll hear more from the park manager, Nikki Lober, later on in this presentation. Later on, we'll also be talking about the specifics of specific roofing products, but I just wanted to demonstrate early on some benefits to the approach. In this case, a benefit was a product with a longer lifespan, lower maintenance. Again, it was only possible because we were able to identify a material that didn't detract from the historic character. I just touched a little on the idea of integrity in that last slide, and I want to provide some more information for our audience who may not be well versed in that concept. One of the criteria to be listed on the National Register is for a building to retain integrity. There are 7 aspects of integrity that are considered, but not all have to be present. We've got location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. The one that relates most closely to substitute products is materials, but certainly workmanship and design are related. The questions I ask myself when I see a proposal for the use of substitute materials are, if a product's to be used, does the building still communicate its historic qualities? How similar would it look now to when it was built? How much original material is still left? The Park Service provides us with the following to consider about the loss of integrity. Any replacement work reduces the historic integrity of a building to some degree, which can undermine the historic character of a property over time. When replacement is made with an in-kind material, the impact on integrity can be minimal, especially when only a small amount of new material is needed. And when a substitute material is used for the replacement, the loss in integrity can sometimes, though not always, be greater than that of a matching material. So whether a historic or a substitute material is used, there is a point where the amount of replacement can become excessive and the building's historic integrity can be diminished to an unacceptable degree. That could result in a building being delisted from the National Register, which is what nobody wants. Just a reminder, today I'll only be focusing on exterior materials. Substitute materials can be used in so many places on a building. These are 5 different typical exterior scenarios of perhaps a dozen that exist. I'll be looking at wood siding, wood trim boards, porches, cornices, and wood roofing. There's a lot I won't get to today. Windows, masonry, other types of roofing, interiors. There isn't the time. You may notice here a theme that it's wood that folks want to replace with a substitute material. At least here in Arizona, it's a state of such weather extremes, so it's probably no surprise. All right, where a particular feature contributes significantly to a character of a building, the materials that make up that feature are likely to require a closer replacement match than a material making up a feature of lesser importance. So a careful holistic evaluation of a building and an understanding of its historic significance of the materials and elements will assist in determining the degree to which a substitute material may be acceptable. The location and visibility of a character-defining feature is an important determinant in whether substitute material will be appropriate. So generally, the more visible a feature is, the more important it is to the building, the more likely a substitute material could affect the historic character. A replacement cornice using substitute materials for a 2-story building, such as the former Superior High School on the left, would need to match much more closely than to the historic cornice only seen from a setback roof decks 10 stories up at Phoenix's downtown security building, that middle photo. Materials on the rear elevations or side elevations may be of secondary importance to a building's character, as in the 3rd photo on the right in Globe, Arizona. As mentioned earlier, all replacement work reduces to some degree historic character of a building. I'm returning to Reardon Mansion. Its National Register nomination highlights not only the tie to the flags, that history and timber, but also the rustic character of the exterior. Reardon's mansion is thought to have inspired the aesthetic of El Tovar Lodge at the Grand Canyon, as it was designed by the same architect and built shortly after the construction of Reardon Mansion. The entire estate is expressed by the presence of wood, from the ponderosa pines that surround the building, to the 1st-story logs, the 2nd-story shakes and planks, the vigas, and the cedar roof shingles. It's pretty remarkable. Initially, the proposed rehab was to use substitute materials, not only for the shingle roofing, but also for the 2nd-floor exterior walls, shakes, and planks. Though SHPO agreed substitute material for roofing was appropriate due to its location and challenges, it was not very visible to visitors. We disagreed that using substitute materials for the 2nd floor was appropriate due to a conflict with Rehabilitation Standards 2 and 5. Number 2 reads that the historic character of a property will be retained and preserved. The removal of distinctive materials or alteration of features, spaces, and spatial relationships that characterize a property will be avoided. Standard 5, distinctive features, materials, finishes, and construction techniques, for example, craftsmanship that characterize a property will be preserved. So consider the amount. The roof material represented a far smaller amount of historic material than the roof and walls combined. The removal of highly visible shake and plank cladding and replacement with a synthetic product, in addition to the roof, could adversely affect the integrity of the materials, probably extending to feeling, workmanship, and association with the listed building. It's about cumulative effect also. It was our determination that the potential here for an adverse cumulative effect, if that 2nd story was replaced, was a concern. Though this project did not rise to such a level of concern, our office occasionally compares situations to the ship of Theseus, a philosophical quandary where you ask yourself if an object remains the same if all its parts are replaced over time. The options for substitute materials are overwhelming. What may have started out as like a creative idea from President Washington in 1797 is nothing like the market of materials that are available today. I wish I could offer you a master list of what's acceptable, but that doesn't exist. I really do look at each project on a case-by-case basis because all buildings are unique. But what I can do is provide you with a framework for decision-making for the various applications that will hopefully meet your needs, preserve the character of the building, and align with the rehabilitation standards. It's worth noting I am not a material scientist, so my approach is not analyzing manufacturer sheets. Rather, I focus primarily on visual matches for physical attributes, as well as location and amount that we just discussed. I do rely on you all to do some homework before submitting a substitute material project for review. Have you considered flame spread, compatibility with adjacent materials, thermal expansion, water absorption, maintenance requirements, and structural requirements? And of course, even within the realm of substitute materials, you may find that they may even be more expensive than an in-kind repair. There are pros and cons to every option, and ultimately the responsibility is yours to do the research. I highly suggest you talk to product representatives as you start investigating, order samples, maybe even do a mock-up. Please note that going forward in the presentation, seeing specific products on the slideshow does not signify an endorsement by Arizona SHPO, nor should something I mentioned be considered a pre-approved alternative. Brief 16 goes into a level of depth I could not possibly in a short webinar, so just consider this your 36,000-foot view. All right, let's dig in. Substitute siding we'll start with. In brief 16, the Park Service provides us with a handy set of guidance questions to ask ourselves, and I'll share them throughout this presentation if they're available as they pertain to a material. When I think about siding, I'm thinking about the height, the width, the depth, surface treatment, if it's smooth or shiny or textured, profile, shadow lines, exposures, and how they meet at the corner of buildings. The Park Service gives us those questions to consider and more. So towards the end of this little list here, I was really interested in thinking about lifespan, impact resistance, fastening requirements, handling. I mean, there's just so much to consider. I'm sharing a couple of photos here on the top left and right. Both are examples of what can happen to a building when a project goes forward without an appropriate visual match to the original. Cementitious siding, also known as fiber cement siding, has four typical components: Portland cement, ground silica, cellulose fibers or wood pulp, and water. So the typical textures are stamped or smooth, but you can make custom orders. They're available in a variety of shapes. Cement siding often has good warranties and a long life, and there's many different brands and products available. But of course, pros and cons. Their standard sizes may not match historic materials that you're building. Cement board is far heavier than wood siding, so the load of a new sheathing could be a concern. It's also hard to repair cementitious siding if it breaks. You'll want to understand the moisture tolerance because it would be way different than wood. Surprise! Asbestos siding is historic age. I know we're all so excited. Developed in 1905, it was a combination of cement and asbestos fiber, which was fireproof. We are not putting it back on buildings due to environmental concerns, but if it was a character-defining feature, you can find a match with a substitute material. Engineered wood siding. It often has a closer visual match to more of a recent past, like 70s aesthetic. It's either smooth or heavily textured, typically it's made of engineered wood strands. It has a beveled shape. It's pre-primed. There aren't any knots or voids. It's kind of similar to cementitious siding in that lots of companies make it. You'll be asking the same questions there that I asked myself, which are those height, width, depth, profile, texture, finish, exposure, pattern. Some downsides I hear about it: the pre-made sizes are not often a good match to your historic siding. Again, this issue that a damaged unit is not repairable. What was interesting to me is you can see that all these companies are marketing engineered wood for just about every application you can think of. I wouldn't be doing my job if we didn't talk about vinyl siding. I get the feeling these days we're doing a lot more pulling off than putting on, but got to acknowledge vinyl siding is approaching historic age. I guess that's a problem for future me, but it's still available. Unlike the other materials we've discussed, this one's often installed over historic materials. It can be ordered smooth or textured, cleans easily, has a long life. But I hope we can all agree there are lots of negatives to using this material as an appropriate substitute for historic wood siding. Never seems to look right. It affects the shadow lines, and also, maybe most problematically, can mask deterioration underneath. So you're certainly able to order flat boards with your substitute siding order from the same company, but sometimes you're not replacing siding and you just need to deal with flat boards, which is why I have this slide here for you. Flat boards might be considered running moldings, window or door casings, trim at corner of buildings, decorative features. Like siding, I'm looking for a good visual match: dimensions, textures, and finishes. Are they paintable to match the rest of the building? The Park Service does provide us with some guidance for questions to ask ourselves when it comes to flat boards. I particularly like their question about what tools are needed to cut it, because our next slide is going to show an example of where that can go wrong. Similar to siding, it asks about lifespan, flame resistance, impact resistance, insects, and fastening. Just so much to consider. I'm also sort of blown away by the half dozen potential substitutes. So clearly this is mass produced. One question you'll want to ask is if your trim piece will play nicely with its neighbor material in terms of installation or expansion or water resistance. We can look at this example here. These are flat boards set into adobe at Empire Ranch in southern Arizona, and they appear to be in pretty decent condition, weathered. If a rehabilitation proposal requesting a substitute material for these boards came through regulatory review, My first question would be, why is a substitute material being proposed? The applicant should provide a clear justification demonstrating why an existing material can't be repaired or why replacement in kind is not feasible. So the decision to use a substitute material should only be considered when there's a limited ability to repair or replace in kind. It's the applicant's responsibility to make that case with appropriate supporting documentation. Porches, they're very special components of historic buildings and a place you really will want to take extra care when considering use of substitute materials. In some cases, it wouldn't be advisable at all to use them, such as this case on the left at Reardon Mansion. But if you got a pretty simple porch, like the one featured in the middle of the slide, which comes from Preservation Brief 16, it's not unreasonable to consider materials that may perform better in very wet weather, for example. So this middle image has already been through a substitute materials rehab using a smooth surface cellulose and polymer material. I admit I knew nothing about what that was, so I looked it up. It is wood strands coated with resin for moisture resistance and zinc borate for insect and fungal resistance, then consolidated under pressure into different shapes. So while that may seem like a pretty great solution for a porch rehab in a wet climate, the post had to be cut at the bottom to fit the porch, which you can see in the right-hand photo detail. It seems to have a bit of a jagged edge on the front face, so I'm wondering, did the manufacturer give instructions on what tool to use? Was it designed as a material to be cut through? Taking it a step further, there's probably now no paint on that bottom edge, and water will be able to seep in. So the lifespan of the substitute material, which was supposed to be longer than the original, may not have that at all. Or maybe they just voided the warranty of the product. So my point is, lest you think a substitute material will solve your problems, they may not. You may have new and different problems to think about when using them. I love a good porch deck. Replacement porch decking and stairs seem to be a routine part of rehabilitation projects, so much that Park Service has its own guidance on how to address them. What do? You ask yourself these questions. What are the widths and lengths and textures available? Site, painted, pre-finished? How well does it hold paint? You all can read. I actually want to focus more on the images on this website. Typically tongue and groove. No two decks are exactly the same. It's true from a construction standpoint, but also a visual comparison. Shout out to Washington SHPO for sharing these images with me. I think it's a really neat examination of how tongue and groove boards are different. From left to right, we have new treated pine, new vertical grain, historic tongue and groove, and a new composite product. So linking them together, the differences and similarities become, pretty interesting and visible. So what do you do when you want your new and improved porch deck to look the same but perform better than your historic one? Trex decking certainly has name recognition. The messaging is that it has great warranty, it's durable, loads of color selections. Typically their options are either engineered hardwood or composite, but is it appropriate for a historic porch rehab? So at the upper left, you can see an end view of one of their porch decking products. The same questions are asked in this situation as the others. Is it a visual match, a profile match, a dimensional match? Is it the right texture? Can you capture any character defining detail with the product? From this picture, not looking likely. As a foil, I found another product online, which is PVC based. And this line's purposefully designed to be a substitute material for wood tongue and groove porch decking. So it's a far better match to historic materials visually, has trim pieces available, it's paintable. And when installed, the deck boards can be spaced appropriately, like in that middle photo, as opposed to the Trex example, which needs spacers in that bottom left photo. So, hopefully this gives you a sense of better and worse visual selections with the understanding that there are many, many in-betweens. I'm bringing these two pictures back on the right from earlier on in the slideshow. Popular substitute materials for cornices include materials we have not considered for other building parts in this presentation so far, and it feels a bit like a choose your own adventure. So do your research first. I've got 4 examples to share. On the top left is polyurethane, which comes in standard profiles. It's also paintable. It's a molded product made by mixing 2 foams together. On the top right is fiberglass. It's a Class A fire rated product, and it is paintable. You can purchase them as standard designs or request custom extrusions. Bottom left is a polymer modified glass fiber reinforced gypsum. It's cast, it's lightweight, it's fire rated and paintable. And those qualities are shared by the pictures on the bottom right, except this is cast from glass fiber reinforced concrete. You can't mention cornices without thinking a little up and into the building's roof. So lately, I would say this is the most inquired after topic, in particular wood roofs. So, fun fact, shakes and shingles, they're not the same thing. Shakes are hand split or would look hand split in the substitute material. Shingles are sawn or look like they're sawn. Shingles are smooth, shakes are not. Shakes are larger with a different profile, and there's different spacing. And those really are character defining features to consider if you're going forward with a substitute material. It was interesting to me on the far right, the Forest Service in 2007 put out their own guidance on this topic. You can see the cover to that brochure on the right, and try to look for it online. I'm pretty sure it's available. It also goes past only wood roofs. The guidance here, again from brief 16, is not just specific to wood roofing. The approach is the same regardless if your historic materials are wood shingle, slate shingle, asbestos shingle, clay tile, concrete tile, or metal. There are loads of potential substitutes, and we'll get into a couple of them shortly. And the questions are pretty similar to all the other questions we've had about how do you make a decision if substitute material is appropriate. Wood roofs, I found in my couple years here, are expensive. They're difficult to maintain. Nowadays, they're a danger. They're being used in a wildfire-prone area. They have shorter and shorter lifespans. I'm seeing requests for roof replacement after 10 years of a wood roof. And substitute materials can offer improved fire impact and wind ratings, which are benefits. So once again, thanks to Washington SHPO, who's done a far deeper dive than I have. The upcoming slides are largely theirs. We're going to look at a few different roofing products. Rubber roofing is made by many companies. To achieve the visual match, the product is surfaced to look more like wood. It can be a pretty decent match as far as I've been able to tell from photographs. It comes in a variety of widths. You see 5, 7, and 12 over there. Advantages include their lightweightedness and their long warranties. I have heard anecdotes. Sometimes these products can have very long lead times. A polyurethane shake would have similar properties to rubber in that it installs like traditional shakes with variety of size and color, lightweight, 50-year warranty, and that same 5, 7, 12. Some benefits, I suppose, is it has a cavity back, unlike the similar rubber-based roofing we just saw, which is solid. Polyurethane can also be sawn down to unusual sizes if you have valleys to deal with. And there's a slightly different aesthetic you can see in the photos. I will admit, I don't know much about plastic shingle alternatives. At first look, I feel like this would be a better alternative for slate based on size and color, but that's something worth noting. A lot of these companies will make multiple roofing products. So, any of these you've seen may offer substitutes for terracotta tile, for slate, for shake, for shingle. So it's worth exploring. Plastic is very lightweight, so I imagine it's a good choice for an older building that might have an undersized roof structure. I was very surprised to see this product has a lifetime warranty. All right, so have any of you played that Never Have I Ever game? Never have I ever received a consultation requesting terracotta as a substitute for wood. I would love to know if this ever happens, but it must, because Washington SHPO sent me this slide, and I thought I would share it with you because we're talking about options. As I would expect, very heavy product. I have to admit, learning that metal was a substitute for wood was surprising me. In Arizona, the first thing I think of is the sun is going to shine on a building and blind a driver. So I was happy to see the pictures. It's a matte finish, but honestly, it does still appear a bit glossy to me compared to a traditional roof. These come in large interlocking panels, which is a different approach. Another metal alternative is Decra. It's sort of a different take. It's a stone-coated steel, so it gives the ability to alternate different colors in one panel. On the right is the 1898 San Rafael Ranch House, which is owned by Arizona State Parks. It's located in a very remote area of the state with pretty harsh weather exposures. It's hard to get to for maintenance also. So it made sense to me when State Parks requested a substitute material in their consultation when their wood shingle roof was at the end of their lifespan. They chose Decra, and I think it looks great. Everybody's given me some pretty good feedback on it. Decra was also used by State Parks at Reardon Mansion, and at this point in the presentation, I would like to invite Park Manager Nikki Lober to turn on her camera, turn on her mic. She would like to tell us a bit about her situation. As I understand it, we did consultation for probably a year. She had a failing wood roof, a good justification for substitute material. I'm also interested in hearing about how she managed the project of getting it installed, and I'd love to know what she thinks now that it's on. So Nikki, are you with us?
I am.
I am.
Oh, I don't know how to solve that. Any tips to get rid of that echo?
Do you have a phone? Or are you into the Zoom twice?
I don't believe I'm in twice, but
yeah, I don't see you in twice. Is somebody else in the room in the Zoom on our computer?
no.
Well, in the, we since they're only going to be on for a few minutes, we may just have to muscle through.
Sorry about that. So our roofs at Rear Mansion are historically the shake original ponderosa pine, and they have been redone multiple times since I was here, about every 7 years. Brendan, any tips to get rid of the echo?
Someone's camera on is causing the echo. Whoa.
Sorry. How about I type in the comments some stuff for you guys, because this is just not okay.
Yeah, and the other computer's not in there in the Zoom.
I do not have another computer on.
No, I meant your person, the other person in the room.
He's not logged in.
Okay. Says turn down your speakers. That may help the echo. Someone suggested.
Is that better? No.
How much? Is there anything, a website or anything that you guys have that talks about this project? Looks like she's typing away. Mary Ellen says you can call in. So why don't you want to continue to work on that? And Susan?
Yeah, sure. Connie, if there's a phone number she can call into, could you drop it in the chat for her?
I believe it should be in the Zoom invite.
Okay. I can give you my perspective on the project while we wait for hers. Although we were partners in this, from day one. This is a really important site. I told you a bit about the history of it, but now it serves as a museum run by state parks. And as you can see in the pictures, that aerial all the way on the right, it is large and sprawling. It has many, many different slopes and valleys. And like she said, the amount of time they were turning around and replacing the roof felt almost nonsensical. I don't know what it was about either the product or the climate, and climate change has to be acknowledged here. I'm seeing this everywhere. Wood roofs are just not faring well the warmer it gets. And in learning about substitute materials and talking with them, I was really impressed with how state parks and their development team, who I don't think are on the call, but perhaps if you are, they did the research, right? When they came and talked to me about wanting to investigate other materials, they had already looked at maybe 3 or 4 different materials from the slides I showed you, did some tables of pros and cons, thought about the finances and the lead time, the character, the integrity, and this sort of DECRA has become their go-to product of choice that they've used on a few different parks throughout the state that have historic buildings and wood shingles. So there's becoming this sort of visual theme through their properties, which is interesting, and they're learning more about the product as it goes on. I've not gotten reports from anyone that there has been like installation difficulties or products breaking. What I really like to know from Nikki is how the public is receiving it, because ultimately that's why we're doing this work, right? These buildings are for public consumption and understanding. And we as professionals, of course, have our eyes on things very closely, but maybe not the public. And this work has got to have been very visible when it was going on. So I think it was really fantastic and interesting, and I'm interested in tracking it over time. We have not had something changing.
Susan, I think,
Nikki,
can you hear me?
Oh, she's calling in.
Yeah, there we are.
Oh, yay, can you hear me
Yeah,
without
thank
ridiculous
you so much,
echo?
Nikki.
Yep, we can hear you,
Okay.
Nick. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Susan, for filling everybody in. Yes, this roof was replaced 3 times before this the Decra material, and since I've worked at this park, about every 7 years. And I did send Susan a great video a visitor took of a raven pulling shingles off the top of the roof that was only 6 years old at that point. It just the type. Back when the Reardons built the mansion, they used ponderosa pine shakes, hand cut, and so you definitely can't get that kind of material anymore. Over the years, they did go to cedar, and it just was not holding up. We haven't had the roof was finished just this spring, earlier this year, so we haven't had a lot of testing on it, but we did have a couple good monsoon rains, and I did lots of looking around in all the nooks and crannies, and we did not have any leakage. So I'm super excited about that, because even with the previous new roofs, we were still having problems of water getting into the house.
Nikki, what has the public said about any of this? I mean, some folks witnessed it being done. Some folks are just coming for the first time with the new roof. Are you getting any comments at all? It would be really interesting to know.
So visitors coming in, comment about it being, if they even say anything about the roof, they don't notice that it's metal. I actually had a visitor want to argue with me over the fact that it was wood. I was like, no, it's not. Yeah, get closer, and you can get pretty close on the back porch and see. But at a glance, people are not noticing the difference at all.
Can you identify any downsides to using this material that maybe we hadn't discussed during consultation?
One thing that it's hard to tell for sure, but the house might be warmer, but that also could just be this summer.
Oh, right. I didn't think about that. So yeah, when you have these loads of questions to be asking yourself is how will they affect the temperature? And in Arizona, hugely important. We don't want it to get any warmer.
But we've been dealing with record high temperatures in Flagstaff, and we do not have air conditioning in the house. So
for folks not in Arizona, northern Arizona has a much different climate, more similar to maybe our Utah and Colorado neighbors than in southern Arizona in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you very much for all the effort you made to speak today. The extra phone call involved was worth it. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all. I invite everybody to come and visit us and check it out in person.
Excellent. All right, so we're reaching the end of the webinar. So there's a lot more I could talk about, and I do want to open the floor to discussion to hear about you guys think. Let's just recap what was covered today. The when, wheres, and whys, mainly the guidance that's out there from the National Park Service and the standards. Reservation Brief 16. It is the framework for using this, for decision making. It is dense. I get that. It's not easy reading, but certainly those questions are a great starting point. I encourage everyone to go to the website, download this brief and any others that relate to work that you're doing. First, we should ask, can this be repaired, or can it be replaced in kind? I really am not a fan of seeing a suggested project for substitute materials without those 2 questions answered first. Next up, if you are considering a substitute material, please evaluate the amount and location in relation to the building's character and make sure it's appropriate. Also appropriate needs to be the physical, visual appearance. And lastly, the more nuanced stuff, but very important, composition, compatibility, and performance matter. So you need to do the research. Just again, want to reiterate that what I discussed today is not a pre-approval for any product, nor an endorsement of any company. But I think if we carefully evaluate everything that we discussed today, we can make well-informed decisions in context of the standards and do what's best for our historic buildings. And with that, thank you for giving me your time. Our office's website is there, and my contact information is there. I think most of you know you can reach me very easily, and I look forward to hearing what your thoughts are on this topic.
Thank you so much, Susan, and I echo a thanks to Nikki for taking the time to call in. Let's see. We do not have question. Yeah, I think there is a question or a request in from Desiree. Will you be able to get a copy of these great slides?
Great question. I do believe that the presentation itself will be recorded and posted on the website for APF. Let me check with my boss lady, Kathy Leonard, to make sure it's okay that I release the slides.
And let me remind everyone, yes, this is being recorded. The recording link will actually, or the recording will be placed on the YouTube channel. It usually takes about a week. And we'll try to get the word out that it's when it's available, but absolutely, and it's always available for anybody who wants to refer to it. Let's see, a lot of kudos. Let's see. A lot of thank yous. Great presentation. Thanks, Susan, Nikki. Great presentation. Thank you. Let's see. Thanks, Susan. All this is a good topic, and I enjoy the case study. It took some of the guesswork out. Desiree says, I have a question about windows in increasingly warming climates. We see a lot of requests for window replacements outright. They're not necessarily irreplaceable. Does SHPO have specific guidance on windows?
Yeah, I was like this close to including windows in this presentation and then realized it could be a presentation in itself. So I absolutely think we can both try to repair and improve energy efficiency and maybe consider use of a storm if the window is such a character-defining feature that keeping it certainly do. But there are options for new windows that are great matches that have features that especially suit warm desert climates. So no, I don't have specific guidance on anything. That's sort of why we're doing this presentation today. But I'm always happy to talk through options with you guys.
Okay, and it looks like Melissa did point out that I'm not sure if she's referring to windows or not. It says preservation brief number 36 covers similar topics for historic landscapes. But prior to that, there was a question on engineered wood. Have you seen problems with adhesives?
I have not, but I'll tell you why. Consultation is strange in that I discuss the plans for a building, we come to a good solution, I sign off, and then I never hear back again in some cases. So if there were problems with adhesives, they may not be reported back to me. I would say my friends who use it, I'm not sure, is that Forest Service? Margaret, I don't know if you have any sense if Forest Service used it. Engineered wood? I'm trying to think of sort of the environment in which that would be used.
Yeah, I think there have, but it's not my forte.
Yeah, I get that. So no, I can't speak to that, unfortunately. Sorry, Kirk.
Then the next question is, thanks, Susan, as you mentioned, the cost of replacement material is rarely a consideration when doing tax credit projects. There has been some discussion lately about MPS considering cost now as a reason for choosing a particular material. Can you discuss where this stands these days?
Yeah, there's been recent acknowledgement of cost as a concern, and I think that actually came out in some kind of guidance document. It may have just been an email or an updated web page. So I do think bringing it to the table for a tax credit project is reasonable, whereas a year ago I would have said don't even try it. If there are any Park Service tax credit reviewers on the call here, certainly chime in. I don't think there are. I think there are other tax credit reviewers on the call. I'm always willing to go to bat for Arizona projects. So if you and I could work out why the substitute material was appropriate, kind of go through the exercises that we just did in the slideshow together, I would definitely propose it.
Excellent. Looks like Ariana mentioned that she is, in fact, slowly working on the suggested window guidance. So more to come on that, it looks like.
That's great. Interior storm windows from Pat Delaney. Yes. So Pat has a special place in my heart. She had my job before me. So she also is well versed in all this.
Oh,
yeah.
Great. And then looks like Ariana says, I've seen adhesive fail in high heat. So she does have some input on that if someone might want to follow up with her on that. Desiree also is it's interesting because locally our HPZ advisory boards and commissioners are pretty open to wholesale window replacements. They recommend approval of them quite a bit, with exception of one local district board. Next question is, have you seen wood products being replaced solely because of insect damage like termites, replaced with non-organic products?
I got very close. I don't know if Pipe Spring National Monument's on this call, but they had just a really bad termite problem, and that was sort of the only problem. And as they did their testing, we sort of figured out a different solution. But that would be as close as I got. And I can look into what we were discussing then, Kirk, if you'd like to know which options were on the table.
And then next comment was interior storm windows are also a good option. And then looks like Ariana's saying that there's a product called Indos.
Mm-hmm.
Not a formal endorsement that works excellent indoor storms. Let's see. And it looks like that's the end of the comments. Does anyone else have any comments or questions?
Can I speak about clay tiles? Sure. Clay tiles are everywhere here, probably more so in southern Arizona than northern. I have definitely seen substitute materials proposed. Usually I'm imagining there's sort of a glass fiber concrete type product, something that maybe is a bit more lightweight. There are some good visual matches and some very poor ones. Some of them, because sometimes you have barrel tiles, sometimes they're a little more swirly with an S shape. So I would be looking at the shape. Color is pretty easy to match these days, so that's less of a concern. Yes, I definitely would consider that. I'd want to know why. That's sort of what I hope the whole presentation tells you is I'm open to it. I just want to know why. Why is this better? Is it money? Is it performance? Is it lack of availability? Yeah, clay tile definitely is something I could cover in another presentation. So actually, I will put this out to the group in the chat. If there's something I didn't cover that you have a burning desire to learn about, write it in, and maybe I can do a part 2 and focus on those.
And I would take this opportunity to let folks know that we are working on developing a workshop or a webinar on Adobe. Susan is offered to do that, and we're looking for folks who have some particular knowledge and skills and be willing to present. So we'll get that information out when we've organized it. But if anybody is interested, let us know. So it looks like there's another question. What is the consensus on replacement materials as a mitigation for disaster management?
Yes, Adobe, Brian. David, there's actually guidance that the Park Service has that sort of lives outside of what I did today that gives disaster mitigation guidance and talks about substitute materials and that. So if you could look for that, I think it's particular to flooding. Not sure if anybody else knows what I'm talking about, but it's sort of like a Secretary of the Interior standards for a disaster situation. So yes, I think, I remember seeing something like PVC trim for windows or even PVC windows in areas that got flooded a lot because it would just be so much more water resistant than the other options.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Seeing a lot of thumbs up. All right, then. Thank you so much, Susan. And as a reminder, yet the third time, we will, this is being recorded. We will get it up onto the APF YouTube channel. And as for that Adobe webinar, we haven't scheduled it yet, but we're looking at hopefully this fall. So as soon as we get things scheduled and organized, we'll definitely get the word out. But if you know of anybody who has these skills and would be interested in presenting, please let I or Donna and Susan know, because we know this is definitely a particular interest and need. So we're hoping to provide that. Thank you all very much for your time today, and keep an eye out on other webinars. We provide these probably a couple of times a year, and they're always free. So check the APF website and calendar for future webinars. So, oh, looks like there's a suggestion in there on the Adobe topic for exposed Adobe brick buildings should be encouraged by owners. Okay, great. All right. Thank you all for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.